Hey everyone, Andy from Steer Smarts. I'm here to go over 5 installation tips and tricks for putting on our tie rod or drag link. There's a few things that we thought we'd give you guys to help with the installation and make sure that everything gets on correctly, so that way you're not running into any issues down the road. So let's go ahead and run through the top 5 things right now. The first tip is to make sure that the end on the driver's side for both the tie rod and the drag link remain parallel to the mounting surface. So the pitman arm is going to be the surface you want to remain parallel to with the drag link, and the knuckle boss is where you want to remain parallel on the tie rod. And what it means by parallel is this line here is parallel to that surface there. If you get this turned and twisted like one way or the other, what you'll end up having is a bind situation, and you can ruin the knuckle that way. Really easy way to tell if it's parallel or not is this boot. It will be symmetrical or the same all the way around. If it's a big gap here and there's a big bulge, or it's pinched together, that's going to go ahead and tell you that it's not installed correctly. The way to fix that is to loosen your clamp and then just twist this until you've got that nice and flat, and then tighten this clamp down and make sure that this doesn't move. The next tip is going to be to make sure that you put anti-seize on your threads on both sides for tie rod and drag link. Anti-seize is going to be something like this. Comes in, it's usually gray. There are other options though. This is a high temp anti-seize and it's copper based. So anything like this is going to get the job done. You're going to take your thread and you're going to take just a little bit of this, and a little bit goes a long way. So you'll just put it on a little bit, and then as you actually thread this on, you will put it against all of the threads inside of the adjuster tube, and what you'll end up doing is keeping this from seizing up. If you're in a location that has harsh winters or uses a lot of salt, it'll make it so that you have really easy access to the adjuster tube, and that it slides and twists without being a problem. The next trick slash tip is in regards to achieving the torque spec that we specify for each of the components. On the ends, you'll find that there are 2 different stud types. This is an earlier stud type. It's going to have the hex on the outside, and this is the newer stud type that you should find in most of the stuff currently, and that has an Allen key on the inside. So what happens is sometimes when you're going to torque the stud down to the spec, you'll notice that the stud itself starts spinning and you can't actually achieve what you're trying to reach. So the solution there is to take your wrench, your 21, put it on your nut, and then the 10 millimeter the wrench goes on top of the stud, and this is what will hold the stud in place as you tighten. So you'll tighten until you think you're good, and then you'll check the torque using your torque wrench. On the other style, what you'll find is that same 21 millimeter wrench for your nut, but a 6 millimeter Allen wrench is what goes inside of the top of that stud, and that's what will keep this from spinning as you tighten it down. And again, you'll tighten it and then check it with a torque wrench until you achieve the torque specification. The 4th tip is in regards to your clamp orientation for the tie rod and the drag link. Now on this Gladiator here, we actually have our new aluminum tie rod with clamps, which is something that nobody else offers. So these clamps are a little bit larger than what these ones are on the chromoly tubes, but the same thing applies. So essentially, you want to make sure that you just put the clamps in orientation where they're not going to have interference with anything. But what you'll want to do on tie rods, especially with this style clamp, is once you tighten everything down and torque them, you want the clamps to be either facing forward like this, or forward and up if you're using a top mount and you have more clearance. And the reason for that is that if these are facing down, they become low-hanging fruit, and you could potentially catch them on something and, you know, have a bad day and bend a tube or an end or whatever. So the key here is, you know, tie rod, you either want them facing forward as this is, or you want them forward and up a little bit, which would give you more clearance when you're on, like I said, a top mount. Draglink wise, facing them forward, or if you're top mount, you can face them forward and down a little bit. However clearance allows you. The biggest thing though is on the tie rod, you want them to not be facing down because that becomes the drag point. The fifth and final tip is in regards to the boots, which are heavy duty and take quite a bit for them to rip or tear. Something that you can do to help them and their longevity is to take a little bit of grease that you would put inside and run it around the top of the boot. And what this will do is make sure that the boot is able to twist and turn and not bind up against the knuckle. Because what can happen is if this gets stuck and gets sticky against the knuckle, rather than spinning freely, it'll actually grab, and then when you're twisting, it'll actually tear these in half. The only other thing that can cause damage to these is on the knuckle, and what that can do is if there's like a sharp burr or a sharp edge on the knuckle, that can actually grab and tear or rip these boots as well. So what you'll want to do when you're installing these is you'll want to check all of the surfaces that these will mate to. So that would be the knuckles on the tie rod, and then the pitman arm for the Draglink, and also the passenger side knuckle for both the Draglink and the tie rod. And you'll want to just inspect those for any sharp edges or burrs that might be present. And what you'll want to do is take a file and just smooth those out if you find anything, because those could become potential tear/drag points. I hope you found these tips and tricks for installing our tie rod and Draglinks helpful. And if you did, give us a like down below and share it away so that other people can be informed about the proper ways to install. Have a good one.